Welcome to the NeuroDiaries podcast. I'm your host, Jade Rose, writer, speaker, and mental health advocate. This podcast is a safe space where we can amplify our voices together. My mission is to make the world a safer and happier place for neurodivergent children and those struggling with mental health conditions and mental illness. The NeuroDiaries podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land. I'd like to pay respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. This episode was recorded on Narrego country. This podcast openly discusses mental health issues and may contain content that is distressing for some. Please take care in deciding if this content is right for you today. Breaking stigma through stories. Welcome to the NeuroDiaries podcast. Hello and welcome back to the NeuroDiaries. I'm Jade Rose and today I'm here with Hugo. Hugo is a neurodivergent advocate and content creator. You can find him on Instagram and TikTok at the handle 210 milligrams. Welcome, Hugo.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. I'm really excited to have some chats and talk about neurodivergence.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited to have you here today. The NeuroDiaries is a safe space for us to have these conversations. It's all aimed at putting stories of lived experience out into the world so people can actually connect with what these conditions actually are, what it actually feels like to have them, what our lives look like. In saying that as well, it is a safe space. So if you need to take a break at any time, if you need to stim and move, absolutely encourage you to go for that. For those who aren't aware, stimming is movements that are very calming and soothing for neurodivergent individuals. I don't know if anyone watches these on YouTube, but you might notice that I'm actually never sitting still. I'm always having some sort of movement and I'm adjusting all throughout the record. So that's just a part of it. It actually helps me deal with the anxieties of talking on here and helps me stay focused on what I'm thinking about, what I'm going to say next. So they actually serve a big purpose for neurodivergent people as well.
Oh yeah.
Do you have any things that you do, Hugo? Do you have any particular stims that are your go-tos?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit gross, but I pick my nails with my teeth. I don't bite them.
Yeah.
I just get the gunk out. What else? I bite my lip a lot.
Yeah.
I'm always cracking my knuckles.
Yeah.
And my neck. What else? Playing with my ring. Always playing with a ring.
Nice.
I like to get it over my knuckle.
Yeah.
And because it's adjustable. And it's not really, but it's not a full circle.
Yeah.
I pull it apart, and then I've got this crazy callus on my knuckle now because I've had this ring for a year and a half. Yeah. So yes, lots of stims, but not as many loud ones as I would like. When I say loud, I mean visible. Yeah, I feel like it was discouraged at a young age, and I always felt very self-conscious of stimming. So I guess the ones that I really sort of live with now to soothe me are very, very internal.
Yeah. A lot of people say that as well. It's you've learned to mask them so heavily. Yeah. I'm really aware of what I'm actually doing, but then I find when I'm thinking about things intensely or when I'm distressed, I just notice my hair, I'm always rubbing my fingers together, and I only recently became aware of this, and I'm holy shit, what? I'm doing this all the time. I had no awareness of it. But it's just, they just sort of happen in the background.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's amazing what kind of, also just it might be jumping the gun. I'm gonna let you lead me back.
Yeah. We can go on some side quests on the way, on some journeys. That's fine.
Yeah, no. I was just gonna say ever, like, since my autism diagnosis, like with stimming especially, I've been noticing sort of urges, and not new sort of urges to stim, but kind of really old repressed urges where it's like I've always had this sort of need to regulate, and now I'm able to identify it as a need, and it's not just a frustrated normal. It's like an actual thing that I can sort of find like equilibrium with like stims, and I've been like outwardly stimming so much more over the last couple months. Like when I get overwhelmed, like and I'm like trying to think about something, I'll often like shake my wrists, and it just little like little things like that have been so it almost gives me like a sense of euphoria when I notice that I'm doing it, because it's like I've always known that that was me, that I was a person who did that, and it just I've just been denying myself of it for so long. So it's really nice now.
That's so amazing. And that's like, that warms my heart. That's just the power of a diagnosis and what it can do. Like, you know, the number one thing is give you back that self-compassion for understanding who you are and how you operate, and also allowing you to make these accommodations that bring so much joy and ease of stress and quality to your life. So I'm so happy for you, and I have so many more questions, but we'll get to them. I think I'll try and drive us down the road, and we'll
get there.
We'll get to those along the way. Before we do jump in, I wanted to get an initial sense of who you are as a person out, you know, not outside of neurodivergence, because it's you, it's who you are, but what does your day-to-day look like? What do you do for work? What do you do for hobbies? How do you spend your time?
Yeah. Well, I am a very bright and loud person. I feel like I always have been. I was definitely sort of discouraged from being that my whole life, and kind of retreated a little bit in my teenage years from, you know, a lot of bullying and just like a general sort of distaste for the way I like from others, and then internalized from myself. But yeah, I at the moment I am a disability support worker 4 times a week, and I make music and social media content, mostly all about mental health and neurodivergence, and my own experience with it. And yeah, I feel like I really enjoy that. I love
great.
entertaining.
What's your style of music?
I feel like it's pretty slow, like electronic. I feel like there's a lot of like you could put a lot of different songs in different genres. I don't know. I feel like you could say like experimental pop or something like that, if that's even it's a bit of a paradox. But for me, I've always just really liked making music that sounds really good to me, and I haven't really worried so much about anything outside of that. But in saying that, I'm still trying to find what does sound good, and it's always changing. So yeah, I feel like my music is a reflection of my mental state at any given time.
Yeah, that's lovely. And you can find Hugo's music on Spotify at 210 milligrams as well, 210 mgs. He does have a number of tracks up there. I've gone and had a listen, so you could definitely check that out as well, to the audience there. Okay, well, Hugo, do you want to introduce for us what neurodivergent conditions you have, and what that looks like for you, how that shows up in your life?
Yeah, I am autistic and ADHD. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was a wee lad, at the age of 11. It was very obvious. I was like a hyperactive ADHD poster child.
Yeah.
And I was diagnosed with autism 6 months ago. So I am now sort of able to confidently say I am ADHD and autistic. And that I'm still trying to figure out what that means for me.
Yeah.
Day to day. It's different every day. I feel like if I was to sort of condense the struggle of it into a sentence, I feel like I'm trying to figure out a way to do the exact same thing every day at the same time, but have it be a surprise every time. I feel like the closer that I can get to that, the more content I feel in my body and in my mind. But it's that's impossible. Yeah.
That's the blend, hey, because you've got the ADHD, which craves novelty-seeking and new, and then you've got the autism, which thrives on structure and routine, predictability.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, one's always pulling from the other. It's hard to find a middle ground.
Yeah, you got to find the balance there. Would you like to, because there's with like, let's just say autism, there's so many different traits within that. Do you have 2 or 3 that you find are really prevalent for you, and do you want to talk us through what they are?
Yeah, for me probably the biggest ones that I am affected by day to day are like transitions, honestly, like moving from one sensory state to another, or an activity to another, or if the like timeline of how I thought an activity was going to go is changed unexpectedly, I just get like extremely dysregulated from that, and it can put me so on edge. It can like honestly like ruin a day. And like I guess in practice, this could look like if like I had a long day at work and I had my public transport route planned out as to where I was going to go, the bus that I was going to get on, and then was cancelled and buses were replacing it. I just have to, in that moment, I have to prepare for a whole nother sensory environment. I probably am gonna like be rubbing shoulders with someone on the bus, and I wasn't gonna have to do that before, and it's just like a whole sort of challenge that I have to work through, and this will happen hundreds of times a day with little different transitions in all the different forms. So I think that's a really big one. And another one is sort of sensory sensitivity, where everything is so bright and so loud and so scratchy. It's like my body is kind of going through life with like raw newborn mammal skin, and I'm just like I mean, as I'm a recovering alcoholic, and that's why I leaned so heavily on alcohol, because it like was the only thing I've ever experienced that could give me a buffer in between me and the sensory like onslaught. So yeah, those two things with autism are big ones for me. They're probably the ones which I don't really have any reliable systems for, but I kind of they still really get me.
Yeah, I get that. And especially being so new to an autism diagnosis, I guess, like are you still in the process of figuring out like what your triggers are, or like what your
yeah, it's really weird. I was in a very strange position when I got diagnosed, because I like, unbeknownst to me, autism and ADHD have been special interest for me for my whole life. And I like, obviously the ADHD research that I did in my childhood was motivated by, you know, the fact that I have it.
Yeah.
But autism research was just purely out of, you know, fascination and interest. And so I knew a lot about autism when I got diagnosed, but I knew nothing about the way that it like related to me, because I had like kind of successfully hidden it from myself. I had all of these like workarounds in my head to sort of convince myself in every single moment that no, it wasn't autism, that there was another explanation. And so I was kind of this like, I was kind of living as a weird like Hugo adjacent, and all of these values that I had kind of hammered into my like the core of my being were just like not based in any reality or fact. They were just like ways of coping. And so yeah, it's been a really weird experience to sort of start matching one to one myself with autism and seeing it sort of blow open all of these other doors that I didn't even expect or I didn't even know were there. And it's like I'm starting to like I feel so much more autistic every day. To clarify, I'm not saying that one could become more autistic, but rather it's the like sort of neurotypical veil that I had for myself, even with ADHD, that I sort of had convinced myself like, no, you don't struggle with this. No, this is fine. This is okay. You can like get over it. In accepting that these were things that were actually really difficult, they've become so much more difficult.
Yeah. And some of the things you called out earlier, like the drinking and the alcoholism, that in itself, from my research, that is quite a common masking technique. To like, some people have said they like alcohol was such a strong masking tool for them that they didn't even realize that they were autistic until they decided to go sober, because it's covering up so many of those impulses, those sensory issues, those like social social differences as well, and allowing you to put on that sort of masked facade that's needed to like engage in the neurotypical world. Was that one of your coping tools, do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, alcohol was such a huge one, and it did just that. It like it allowed me to dial back the sort of volume of the world. And I feel like a lot of the things that make me, or at least in the way I understand it, feel classically autistic, when I'm drunk, it's that they stop bothering me. Like they stop having an effect on me. Transitions aren't hard. Things aren't loud. Things aren't bright. It's, people, I don't notice the like uncertainty of a look that someone gave me. I don't I'm not bothered by someone misunderstanding my tone of voice. Like it's everything sort of all of the things that sort of snag me in my social navigation and in sort of moving through a day, and sort of take me out of the moment, no longer do with alcohol. And that's why it was the only time I've ever felt calm, like internal calm and peace. And it was unhealthy and manufactured for sure, but it was peace. Like it was quiet, and that was something that was so hard to replace.
Yeah, I totally get it. I relied heavily on alcohol for a number of years as well. I stopped drinking about 18 months ago because I was relying on it as a daily tool, and replaced it with yoga to
Oh, look at you.
Yeah, look at me go.
Going full health
I know.
mode. Yeah. I'm 10 months sober now myself.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's
Um
amazing. It's so hard to replace it. Like for me, yoga became like, it was really a way to like regulate my nervous system that wasn't relying on like what wine would do for me. Have you
yeah.
found like how have you managed to give it up? Have you got something else that's sort of helping you?
Yeah, I think it's been a mix of a lot of different things. I think to sort of get any semblance of the way that I felt when I was drunk, I it's a lot of work. Like I feel like having a good support network, like for me, surfing is a huge like regulatory thing. I run really hot. I'm always like on the verge of sweating. And so like just being in the ocean, especially here in wintertime, is just like one of the most sort of soothing, relaxing things. So I surf a lot. And I I feel like I'm so much more. It's funny, like after having, like you said it so well earlier. I feel exactly the same way. I had to stop drinking to realize my autism. It was the only way it was going to happen, because I couldn't have seen it before, because it was like just I was so overwhelmed at the time. I was in a really bad place with mental health, and all I could do was self-soothe. There was no room for any, introspection or any work. I was just so like deeply exhausted. And so, yeah, I feel like now sober, I'm more equipped than I ever have been to stop drinking, which is such an irony.
Yeah.
Um,
It makes sense, like in some respects, because they say like autistic brains are processing like on average 42% more information from the world and their sensory experience, external stimuli, than a neurotypical brain. And if you think about like having that much extra information and sensory inputs coming in, but then you're still being expected to function at a neurotypical pace and in a neurotypical environment, like think of the overwhelm that's causing. And alcohol is one way to sort of blunt that and, take yourself out of that, take the pressure off a little bit. So, no, I totally get it. And like people with neurodivergence are more likely to develop alcohol dependencies throughout their lives, like for these reasons. But until you actually, I think if you then become aware of autism and these traits that you have, you're then able to make healthier accommodations for them and for yourself, so you don't have to rely on alcohol as much.
yeah. Yeah, you just mentioned the more information in that autistic people perceive. I feel like on top of that, like that percentage doesn't surprise me at all. I feel like I feel I feel like I'm living that. But just then like on top of that, there's the whole like autistic people don't understand like social cues, and I feel like it's a big spectrum. Obviously, I mean, some of the people that I work with in disability support are autistic, and they're nonverbal. They're totally disconnected from their body, like, and I am also autistic, sitting here talking about it. So it's a huge distance. But I feel like with the whole social understanding part of it, I feel like I've always taken in all of the social information, and I've like, I don't understand it intuitively, but I've cataloged, all of the different facial expressions and all of the different tones of voice, and I see it in a map in my head, and I sort of, when I'm in a new situation, sure, I'm totally lost, but I feel like the thing that really frustrates me is to sort of understand social situations and so many autistic people do really intimately. You kind of have to grapple with this like idea that neurotypicals don't know why they do things, and they don't know why they say things a lot of the time. And it's like for you to, when you don't laugh at a joke that you don't think is funny because this person is like punching down at like this like X, Y, and Z, and no one else in the group can get an accurate read on why it's not funny. But but everyone's laughing. Some people are just laughing because they're just going along with it. It's like neurotypicals are so unaware, I find, of like the way that they are, and their little idiosyncrasies. And for an autistic person to have to like break it down, like break language and social cues down so that they can build them back up so that they can understand them. It's just such a different, I'm going on a whole tangent. It's just such a different like playing field, because you're not talking to people who are on the, for any sort of middle ground to be reached, you would have to sit them down and go through all of these like associations and different meanings of like why what they said in this situation was confusing, and why like it's so, I don't know. I'll stop there. But
No, I was following along the whole time. I get what you're trying to say. I think it's sort of like for autistic people, and you're right, like there's so many different kinds of autistic people. Like if you've met an autistic person, you've met one autistic person, and the spectrums play out. Like you've got, the numbers people and the nonverbal people, but then you've also got these really social people, and it's sort of like as you're saying, the social cues and how to, it's not intuitive at all. I'm going through this with my son at the moment. So he's 4.5. He's just become diagnosed with autism. And it's really clear to see with him, because he's in preschool at the moment, and all through his early baby toddler years, like he just didn't get the social picture, just wasn't aware of it. I'd take him to play groups and he wouldn't even like see the other children. He'd see the activities and the stuff. They'd pair up in little groups and go off to play, and they'd be like, come and play. And if it wasn't the activity that he was interested in doing, he wouldn't do it. He didn't understand like why we would go with someone if it wasn't his thing. But since he turned 4, a switch happened, and he's become aware that there's a social game going on. And he wants to play, but he really doesn't know how to. He doesn't know how to approach the other kids, and he's hyperverbal as well. And so there's a lot of back and forth. It's really hard to get a diagnosis when you Google like, oh, is it autism that we're working with? And then autism tells you like the very standard sort of autistic traits, and not the whole
I think
spectrum of what it could look like.
I think a lot of mental health professionals who, I say professionals with a lot of disdain for this, but I feel like a lot of autism diagnosis is still being graded, which I also have a problem with, on inconvenience to the neurotypical, or like ability to be perceived by the neurotypical, and it's totally disregards that people will mask, and it kind of ends with, like, as we understand it now, and especially as reflected in literature, our understanding of autism kind of ends with people who will mask, and that they, with people like people like Chloe Hayden, who are doing such incredible like activism for autism and kind of putting themselves on blast on the internet as, autistic out loud. It's just like that whole understanding is changing. But yeah, it frustrates me every day that someone like your son who is going through that journey could be dismissed for showing signs of intelligence. Like it's like heartbreaking because autistic people like if you're taking in more information, full stop, you're gonna be smarter. Like it's like you're always thinking about more. You're going to be coming to more conclusions. You're going to be experimenting with different thoughts. You are going to be capable of synthesizing more concepts than other people.
And then it just comes down to like, can you communicate that in a way that would make sense to neurotypical people?
Yeah. I think the conclusion that I have come to about the way that I present is I feel like I've done masking I mask sort of totally subconsciously, and that I don't really have control of. It kind of just comes over me when I'm in certain company or certain environment. But I'm done holding other people's discomfort for them. I feel like the only way forward as an autistic person, because that's what I am, is to be autistic and to learn as fast as I can what that looks like, and then to do it loudly.
Yeah, I love that so much. I think there's if we can get to a place, I think there's an education piece that needs to happen with the neurotypical population in understanding that these behaviors that have been sort of shamed and dismissed and tried to be suppressed for so long, like stimming or like slow processing, for example, or non-eye contact and things like this, like they need to understand that these behaviors allow autistic people to thrive and to function to their best ability. And it has to go both ways. Like I was initially trying to teach my son, like, okay, I need to manually teach you social cues and how to interact with your peers. But then it occurred to me that I don't want to just teach him how to act neurotypical. We also have to go in and teach his peers how to interact with an autistic person.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not fair that he has to do all of the work. Like they need to understand how his brain works, how he likes to play, and make efforts to meet him there as well for his happiness, really, so that he's not like suppressing anything.
Yeah, and I think that's where we kind of get to a crossroads in the discourse, because it's like not you and me, but like society. It's to sort of start having that conversation of allowing autistic people to grow up in a safe, happy environment. You have to force neurotypical people to come to an understanding that they're not doing any deconstruction of their personality before they get to adulthood. Like they're kind of just, out here taking, doing the first take, and then they start getting into romantic relationships. Like it's like by the time I already knew that I didn't get it. And I knew that like I was lucky in that I was totally fascinated by people, and that I always wanted to learn. But autistic special interests are so diverse, and they don't, that doesn't always happen. Like by the time I was 12, 13, 14, I knew that I was different, and that I had to sort of, to avoid invalidation, I had to appear a certain way. But if my point is that if there wasn't the bullying, and if there wasn't, if there was a safe environment, I would still have had that much, introspection. And I think a lot of autistic people would say the same, is that I was still like aware that I didn't understand social cues.
Yeah.
And I was still like, okay, well, how do I navigate this if this, and this, and how do I, like, it was something that I wanted to learn about from a point purely of curiosity. And yes, there was the added layer on top of survival. Like, I had to stop getting bullied so much. I had to stop like seeming like the odd one out in a room. They were like big priorities, but they weren't the driving motivation. The driving motivation was always like interest, and and a desire to resolve the confusion that I was feeling about it. And I just don't see neurotypical people attacking it with the same sort of problem-solving mindset. And I think that would, like, there has to be so much integrated education, but then also the education system is ableist and it doesn't cater at all to like autistic learning, but also any learning. Like, kids aren't like engaged in school. You could put like a philosophy and psychology mandatory class every year, and there would still be kids who like ready to commit themselves to learning yet. Anyway, another tangent.
It is really interesting, like, and hopefully we're moving into a different world. Like, I really hope that for my son. The thing is, like, he knows he's different. He's 4 and a half. He came out from preschool a couple of weeks ago and he said, I had a hard day, Mum. And we're getting in the car and he says to me, Mum, I wish I wasn't different. And I said to him, like, what do you mean? Like, who said this to you that you're different? Like, where did you get that from? And he's like, oh, no one said this to me. And I was like, well, why do you think that? He's like, I just know that I am. Like, he literally said these words. And he's like 4 and a half. It's just like, it's innate. And I think back in like our day when we were young, it would have been more like, oh no, you're not different, or everyone's different, or like, don't worry. And it's like, well, he's here burning with this like inner conflict of like who he is, how he relates to the world. He can already see that he's different from the other kids. So for me, like, step one, I'm like, okay, I need to validate that. It's like, yeah, you are different. Your brain works a little bit differently.
Yeah, immediately from the outset. Like, it's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing.
Exactly.
Like, that's okay. And
you're right. Like,
yeah, you're right.
And you are. Yeah,
good,
exactly.
Good,
you've
spotting.
made an accurate reading. Yeah, exactly.
I think that's so important for them. Like, giving that sense of like, you're right. That like, immediately that takes a weight off his shoulders. It's like, oh, I actually am. Like, okay, I don't have to worry about whether I am or aren't anymore. Like, I know that I am.
That's so important. Like, from like the amount of sort of motivation that I had to mask was sourced entirely from like a deep understanding that it was bad different, that I was wrong different, and that I needed to change in order to be accepted. But if you can like frame that for like right from the start because those pivotal like conceptual conclusions that kids come to at those ages are so defining for how they grow, and how they like, it becomes the foundation for everything that they learn about the world, and it will inform everything that they learn. So it's like, that's so important.
It's that time when they're forming the core beliefs about who they are and their identity.
Yeah.
And I said to him, you won't always be different. There's a lot of other people out there with brains like you. And I said to him, you might be different from your peers or your friends, but I said, you're just like me. And he loved that. He got a huge smile on his face, and he's like, oh, like, it's nice to be able to offer like that comfort. And that's the thing, like, you just want to be a safe space for them.
the isolation was definitely one of the hardest parts of that feeling. Like I never really had I kind of never really had anyone that I understood or related to until I was like 19.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like
Yeah.
it's that's such a huge part.
Yeah. I can relate to that as well. That's why, like with the neuro diaries, it's like the whole concept is like dear diary. I can't tell you like how many
Yeah, it's so good.
times I'd be like journaling because that was the only way I could connect with someone. It was myself, but
Yeah.
like put some thoughts out there in a place where they not necessarily being validated because no one's reading this. It's just for me, but at least they're not being invalidated. They're
Mm.
they're there. They're
Exactly. They're there without judgment. And it's then even to go further, it's like we a lot of neurodivergent people, especially like young, but also old, also, you know, parents, grandparents, like a lot of neurodivergent people have gone their entire life in masking in social circles where they have always had majority negative like
yeah.
interactions. And been viewed negatively, and that gets so internalized that there's like at a certain age the way back to self-acceptance is like almost impossible.
Yeah. That's why the like neurodivergent people have a much higher likelihood of developing comorbidities like depression, anxiety, like substance abuse disorders, like because innately like it's a negative experience of the world. If we can get to a place where it's accepted, you know, you're free to live with your accommodations that provide you like ease of living, then there's no reason that neurodivergence should equate to more mental health problems.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
you should be able to be neurodivergent, be very mentally healthy.
Of no accommodations for sure.
Yeah. Oh, well, we've been on to big rabbit holes here and I love it. I'm all here for it. I do want to just take us back to, I guess, your diagnosis story for more specifically for autism, because you said that was 6 months ago. What led you to get to this place where you sort of, how did you suspect that? What led you to go and seek diagnosis?
Yeah. So I got really lucky. My therapist at the time is qualified to diagnose autism, and we kind of were. This was something that I had suspected and also come back to after convincing myself out of it for years.
Okay.
Ever since I was like sort of 16, 17, I would do it again. Like I would take all the autism quizzes and I would like go down all of the rabbit holes, and I was masking sort of like enough that I had fully convinced myself that of a lot of things that made me look not autistic based on like I thought that I loved loud spaces, and I forced myself to, and alcohol was a big part of like what made that lie sustainable. And that I loved, like I also had to explain everything through my ADHD because I didn't have anything else that that made sense. So I was trying to cram everything into this box that it just didn't fit into. Yeah, this kind of came at the perfect time, talks with this therapist, because I was kind of ready to actually consider it. I was in a place where I was able to start unmasking. Like my social environment was safe. I am dating a wonderful person who is also neurodivergent. And yeah, I feel like for the first time I was able to start sort of living through it and living, according to how I actually am. And so I started talking about it with my therapist, and she gave me a bunch of quizzes to do, and then we did an assessment, and it was like very clear, and it's become so much more clear since the point of diagnosis. But it wasn't the diagnosis that opened it up for me. It was me actually accepting for real that I am autistic. And I think the diagnosis went a long way for me to accept that, because I had been gaslighting myself out of this in every different way for years. So it was I was going to be the last person to accept it.
Yeah. Wow. It is hard when you're talking about this sort of stuff, because it's all invisible, right? There's no like blood test you can take that says yes, 100%. Exactly. And when you're dealing with like stigmas and perceptions and your different moods, and then taking into account, but I was able to achieve this or do that or do this, I do like doing this stuff. So sometimes it's so conflictory with the information that's available. Like, you can really go over and over it for years. Am I, aren't I? That was me accepting my bipolar diagnosis in my 20s. That took a long time.
Yeah. I think it's something that like neurotypicals, especially sort of closed-minded ones, really, really struggle to grapple with, because it's like, well, are you autistic or aren't you? There's no understanding that I'm doing this I've been doing this for them. Like, you are the reason that I have not been diagnosed yet. Like, I have been doing all of this work, convincing myself that I like these things, that I want to be here, that I like you, like that I don't. And it's like I'm so far, the reason why it's taken me so long to get here is because of everything that that you, like all of the people in my life have said to me and said about me. And like it just makes me laugh when they then turn around and say, well, if you're questioning it, then it's probably not true. It's just like, it's just so wild.
Yeah. It's almost like you need to, do you feel this sense of like having to prove it and justify the ways in which you are autistic, like to other people?
Yeah, less and less so. But I've been sort of catching myself more and more. I am an over-explainer, because I sort of am so constantly afraid of being invalidated and having people, not believe me or not accept what I say as genuine. That I feel like, I do have to prove lots of things that other people aren't even, like, a lot of the time other people aren't even looking for proof. They're not, but it's become this compulsive thing that I keep coming back to at my most vulnerable, where it's like, I think that the biggest thing that's changed about it now is that I believe me, like for the first time, and I was so deep in the mask for most of my life that I didn't believe me at all. Like I had no real concrete sense of who I was or what I liked or what I wasn't okay with. And that snowballed into its own thing, but it definitely came from, a very simple, I'm different and also not accepted for that difference. So I think that less and less now, as I become more okay with myself, in a vacuum, I feel less of a need to prove that I am autistic. I'm actually starting to revel in the uncertainty that some people give, because I can see they don't even have the, like they couldn't even start to make an accurate understanding of what to be autistic means based on what they know in that moment. And so I'm quite enjoying, I have been recently like under informing people who don't need or ask for the information.
Yeah. I think it's like when you've been masking so heavily for so long, there's probably things like that you struggle with that other people would look from the outskirts and be like, they wouldn't even realize that is something that you think about or something that you struggle with.
But also like take completely the other way. Like I will notice a tone in someone's voice and I'll be convinced that they aren't, being genuine, or that they don't actually like want me to like be at a thing or whatever, and then I will withdraw and remove myself from the situation, and then they will reach a conclusion of like, oh, they just don't like me. And it's like it goes completely the other way, because there's so many layers of and I think anxiety, I like, it's not something that I struggle with, but that also like is such a the same sort of thing happens. I feel like a lot of people can relate to that for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, there's a very specific flavor of it with neurodivergence.
I think it's very unconscious, perhaps at the moment with neurotypical people. It's this very still unconscious bias towards their preferences for communication and them not being met by the neurodivergent people. I think that, like, I don't want anyone to feel attacked for like those behaviors. I think the whole thing is they're unaware of them. We need them to become aware of them and work together to change them.
No, that's a good thing to clarify. I think I have a lot of like internalized anger towards neurotypicals, and that's my thing to work through. It's not justified and it's not healthy, and but it's definitely there. And so I think like when I've not known what to do with that, I've always removed myself from that social circle or situation. But yes, the more like information and the more aggressively we push it out, this is, neurotypicals obviously are not inherently bad people. It's a failure of the system to inform and to allow people to have the tools to understand neurodivergence that causes all of the harm. And it's the if neurotypicals were also equally uncomfortable, we would not have this discrepancy in suicide, depression, anxiety. Like, lived experience would not be so different between the two. And I think the fact that it is, and like transcending culture and gender and sexual orientation, like the way no matter where you go in the world, if you find a neurodivergent person, there's a similar story there. I think that is a testament to the fact that this is a very real phenomenon, and there will be no choice but to respect it and understand it, and hopefully less, it'll just be like being left-handed, and it won't be a topic of contention. It'll just be something that you'll be working alongside a coworker, and they'll notice something because they're informed, and they'll say, "Oh, you're neurodivergent." You'll be like, "Yeah." And they'll be like, "Oh, cool." Like it'll, and so I no hate to neurotypicals. I feel like there's definitely something to be said where if you are in an unhealthy social environment as a neurodivergent, you can remove yourself from that. You're not a bad person for distancing yourself from people who are taking from your health and well-being, whether that's intentional or unintentional. But yeah, it's definitely an issue of information and education for sure.
I struggle with that issue of like intention, because I'm like, if I think about neurotypical people that I know like individually, it's like their intention is never bad. So I struggle to get like, but you feel, but the impact is the same, because the unawareness is still causing like this negative, harmful impact. So you're justified in feeling like angry about it, because they haven't made the effort to like make it conscious and change it. But also you don't know what you don't know, right? So
and that's
how do they do that? How do they get to that point?
The neurodivergent knows that it's unintentional. We know that they don't mean it, that it's uninformed bias. That's why we take it and put it back on ourselves every time to fix the problem, and why that's such a common coping mechanism, because it's not the neurotypical's fault, and that makes it so hard and to know what to do with the anger and the resentment, because it's like, what do I
it's like on an individual level, like neurotypicals are great and they have well intentions and like they mean well, and like I really believe that 99% of neurotypicals would want to understand and want to help to make those accommodations. But it's like a bigger like cultural, societal change. But that's why we're here, right? And that's why we're advocating and putting our messages out and talking about this. I know you said 100 years, but my son's 4.5. So in my mind, it's like, okay, he's going to enter the workforce at, I've got 15 years. I'm going to do everything
I can to make it happen quicker.
Let's go. Let's do this.
We're all out here trying to make it happen. Yeah.
I love that. Well, look, before we wrap up today, I just want to ask, is there anything that you wish the general public, what's the biggest thing that you wish they understood about living with neurodivergence?
Damn. Okay. Honestly, not even anything to do with neurodivergence. I would just. What audience are we talking to right now? Is it like the neurodivergent listeners? Or
good question. I mean, they're both the general public, aren't they? So
yeah.
Could be any. Do you have a message for everyone, or a message for? You can break it up. A message for either party.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll talk to neurodivergence for this message, but this is helpful for everyone to know. Understanding of your neurodivergence is going to come in waves. Like, you're going to get to a point of understanding. It's going to be, so eye-opening, and it's going to be so, much more overwhelming than you ever thought it could be, in understanding yourself and how you operate and what you need. And it, as you sort of open up into yourself, there will be things that happen. There will be unforeseen circumstances. It's totally natural to start to want to regress back into the mask. And because that is probably going to be the most comfortable, most familiar thing until you've been, unmasking for a long time. So it's okay to go backwards a little bit. It's okay to sort of turn around and say, oh my God, like, I feel like I'm forcing myself to do this thing again. I'm forcing myself to cope like this again. It's all right to sort of even feel like you're starting back from square one, because each wave of opening yourself up, it's all happening in reverse. Like, you've piled all of this on top of yourself to survive and cope with, living before diagnosis, living through bullying, invalidation, like each layer that you peel off is going to be so new and so fresh and exciting and scary. So allow it to happen over time. Let it be unfinished. Don't worry about a point of final unmasking. You're going to keep learning about yourself. You're going to keep understanding yourself, and you're going to be all the better for it. So just allow yourself to stick with the process. It's probably not going to be linear, and that's okay. It's totally normal. And enjoy it is what I would say.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes, a message on acceptance. If you want more messages like this, Hugo you do share these sorts of thoughts that you have and this beautiful messaging for the neurodivergent community on your Instagram. I know I like watching them and getting those messages from you. So do check that out as well. 210 mgs. Is it milligrams? 210 milligrams?
Yeah, whatever you want, honestly. But it's 210 milligrams, but everyone says it every different way. So I'm
like, is that what it stands for? Is there another code? But
yeah.
No, go check that out. Especially, if you are on this journey yourself, I think Hugo shares lovely messages of acceptance, of compassion, self-compassion like that. So yeah, definitely go and have a look there. And Hugo, thanks so much for coming on. This has been a fantastic chat. I've really enjoyed learning about your experience and getting your insights on all of this as well.
I've really enjoyed it too. We went a lot of different ways. It was fun.
I love it when that happens. It's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to stop the record. Perfect. Enjoying the Neuro Diaries? Every interaction helps break the stigma, so be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review on your favourite podcast listening app. Visit our Instagram at the Neuro Diaries Podcast and join our Facebook group to continue the conversation. Through sharing and connection, we can foster understanding, empathy, and support for all.